Chapter 1. Rena, how about we go to the resort tomorrow? I've already made the arrangements. Ethan handed me his phone, his eyes filled with anticipation. I gently pushed the phone aside and looked at my cousin, who was engrossed in her own phone. If we're going out, we can't just leave Sweetie at home. My cousin flinched at the mention of her name, looking at me nervously. I don't want to go. Realizing her reaction was too strong, she lowered her voice and forced a smile. I mean, you and my brother-in-law should have a sweet time together. If I go, I'll just be a third wheel and ruin your romance. Her words sent a chill through me. I had thought my cousin and I share close bonds as sisters, but it turned out she was the wolf in disguise. When she graduated from college and didn't want to work, she came to live with me. Sis, you're rich anyway, so taking care of me wouldn't be a burden. If I go home, my mom will definitely force me to go on blind dates. I don't want to walk into the grave of marriage. She pestered me all afternoon, and I eventually relented. I provided for her generously, not realizing that she had been flirting with my husband for a long time. In my previous life, I agreed to my husband's travel plans. On the way, he suddenly had a fit of road rage. Because the white car ahead was slow, he started cursing. Damn it, this must be a body driving. Driving so slowly must be a female driver. Before his words even finished, he honked and accelerated, overtaking the car on the right. I was scared and my voice trembled. Ethan, what are you doing? Are you crazy? Ethan sneered. What's there to be afraid of? He then started wildly maneuvering the steering wheel, causing the car to swerve violently. I clung tightly to my seatbelt, my breathing becoming rapid. Slow down. Be careful. Before I could finish, a loud crash came from behind. Somehow, my seatbelt had come undone, and my body was thrown against the windshield. The glass shattered, raining shards onto my head and face. Meanwhile, my husband Ethan remained unharmed due to a last-minute left turn. The pain brought me back to my senses and I realized my foot was stuck. Honey, my foot. But he quickly opened the car door and stormed to the back, furious. Can you even drive, you idiot? I was gripped by fear, and as my blood drained, my body temperature dropped. Due to the adrenaline, the pain dulled a bit. I raised my voice. Ethan, help. Save me. There's someone in the car. But my shouts went unheard, only accelerating my blood loss. As I was about to lose consciousness, Ethan returned. He gave me a cold smile and opened his phone. Everything is settled. Don't worry, Rena is already half dead. He glanced at me, putting his hand under my nose to check my breath. I'll wait a bit before calling the ambulance. They flirted for a while, and I clearly heard my cousin's excited voice on the other end. We don't have to hide anymore. Her assets will be ours. Ethan smiled, wiping my blood off his hands. Accidental death plus compensation. Then you can give me a big healthy son. Hearing this, I was too weak to breathe. Ethan closed my eyes with his hand. We'll bring our son to visit your grave. After all, without you, we wouldn't have money. I'm not going, sis. Sweetie tugged at my sleeve, her voice cautious. I pushed her hand away, trying to keep my tone calm. Sweetie, are you worried Ethan won't want you to come? I turned to Ethan, feigning anger. Honey, if Sweetie doesn't come, I won't either. Both of them panicked. Ethan stammered nervously. Of course not. Sweetie should come with us. Sweetie nodded vigorously. I'll go. Seeing them agree, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Chapter 2. Back in the bedroom, I buried myself under the covers. The suffocating air made me feel like I was choking. I suddenly lifted my head. In my previous life, I trusted them completely and ended up dead. This time, since I've been given a second chance, I'll make them suffer 100 times more. The next day, Sweetie naturally took the front passenger seat. Ethan looked at me in the back seat with a strange expression. He nudged Sweetie, who was about to buckle her seatbelt. Don't you have any manners? That's your sister's spot, my wife's spot. Perhaps out of guilt, he raised his voice when he said, wife. Sweetie quickly realized and started to get out. I stopped her, smiling. It's fine. You sit there. I'll sit in the back. I moved to the middle of the back seat. Both of them looked uneasy, their expressions complex. I had been blind before, not noticing their obvious affair. I worried whether Sweetie would adapt to living with us. Once I buckled my seatbelt, Ethan started the car. The atmosphere was quiet until we encountered the same white car as in my previous life. This car had been arranged by Ethan. As planned, it drove slowly. This time, Ethan didn't curse. I held my breath and shouted, "Ethan, overtake it! This car is so slow. It's driving me crazy." Ethan glanced back at me, looking troubled. "I can't, honey. There's a big truck next to us. We can't overtake." I saw the two trucks I had arranged on this road. Sweetie echoed, "Sis, can't you see the truck? How can we overtake?" I smiled. In my previous life, Ethan overtook on the right. Would he dare not to with his lover in the car? Ignoring their pleas, I snapped, "Overtake on the right. Hurry up, or I'll cut your bonus this month." Hearing his bonus was at risk, Ethan panicked. He gritted his teeth and overtook on the right. The car behind, as if signaled, also sped up. Ethan was driving at 70 miles per hour, and the car behind sped up to 80 miles per hour. Sweetie, like me in my previous life, kept glancing at the rearview mirror, her body trembling slightly. 5 minutes later, the white car crashed into us. Ethan, fearing injury and worrying about Sweetie, veered slightly to the left. With a screech of tires, both cars came to a stop. Sweetie was better off than I had been in my previous life. Only her foot was stuck. She was unscathed thanks to her seatbelt. Ethan had a minor scrape on his arm. Sitting in the middle, I was only sore from the seatbelt, otherwise unharmed. But they were still in shock when another big collision hit us. This time, both unbuckled, they were thrown against the windshield. Ethan's face pressed against the glass, relatively unscathed due to the angle. Sweetie, on the other hand, was bleeding badly from her head. I stormed out of the car furious. Who the hell hit my car? Chapter 3. Sweetie lay in pain on the seat, covered in glass shards. Ethan, gritting his teeth, got out and immediately tried to help Sweetie. "Honey, we need to get Sweetie out first. She's stuck and in pain." He looked at her with concern, instinctively moving to her side of the car. But I grabbed his arm, pulling him away. "Sweetie is fine. Let's go deal with that driver first." I practically dragged Ethan to the driver of the car behind us. The driver, a burly man with a large belly, approached us, initially taken aback upon seeing me. You're not supposed to be." Ethan interrupted with a loud reprimand. "Supposed to be what? Are you blind? Don't you know what safe following distance means?" He exchanged meaningful glances with the driver, who quickly caught on. Hands on his hips, the driver started arguing with me. "Were you the one driving just now?" He widened his eyes, clenching his fists. "So what if I was?" Mimicking his stance, I raised an eyebrow. "You rear-ended us, so it's your fault. You know that, right?" The man's face reddened, his neck stiffening as if ready for a fight. "That's because a car hit me from behind." Then, a burly man stepped forward from behind his car. Full of apologies, he said, "It was my fault. I'll cover all the damages." They say not to hit a smiling face, especially when the person is being nice. The driver's anger dissipated. "Fine, you said it." He pointed at me. "Make sure you cover her damages too." Ethan, almost frantic, kept glancing back at the car. But every time he tried to speak, I interrupted. The driver was only after money. Originally, he and Ethan were working together, but with this turn of events, he wouldn't get Ethan's money. However, with the large truck offering to cover the costs, he wouldn't suffer any loss and might even get compensation. So he wanted to leave. But leaving wasn't going to be that easy. I grabbed him. "You think you can just leave? This is my new car and I have a dash cam. If I call the police, you'll still have to pay up." Ethan's face turned pale at the mention of the dash cam. He leaned in. "Honey, when did you install it?" I whispered. "I'm bluffing." He visibly relaxed. I had considered installing one, but for revenge, a dashcam could be a liability. The driver, realizing I wouldn't back down, softened his tone. "All right, I'm out of luck. Let's settle this privately, okay?" I checked the time. 15 minutes had passed since the accident. I quickly pulled out my phone. "Fine. I'll record a video of you promising to compensate me." By the time the driver finished talking, another 10 minutes had passed. Seeing the time, I rushed back to the car. "Ethan, my sister is still in there. Why aren't you helping her? Are you brainless? Don't you know there's someone in the car?" Ethan tried to argue, but seeing Sweetie barely conscious, he lost his nerve. His face dark, he tapped his unconscious cousin. Sweetie, are you okay? Sweetie, wake up. To avoid suspicion, I also started crying. Sweetie, don't scare me. Please wake up. Chapter 4. After calling for an ambulance, I noticed my hands were stained with blood, sticky and foul-smelling. Meanwhile, Ethan had managed to get Sweetie out, laying her on the ground and partially supporting her. Did you call for an ambulance? When will it get here? Ethan, now calmer, turned to glare at me, anger in his eyes. Rena, if you hadn't dragged me away, she would have been fine by now. I shot back. How dare you say that? I lost my temper because I was angry and didn't think about her. But what about you? Did you forget to? Ethan looked at me, disbelief etched on his face. You. I turned away from the car, trying to hide my inner joy. The ambulance arrived quickly, and we were all taken to the hospital. Sweetie was ice cold, her face ashen. I immediately called my aunt. Auntie, because of my husband's negligence, Sweetie is in the hospital now. Ethan snatched the phone from me. It wasn't me, it was. Before he could finish, I slapped the phone out of his hand. The nearby doctor shot us a disdainful look. If you want to argue, do it at home. We have patients here. I lowered my voice, seething. Ethan, if anything happens to Sweetie, I will never forgive you. Sweetie's mother arrived at the hospital almost simultaneously. The doctor's expression turned grim as they took her in. Prepare for the worst. She's in hypovolemic shock with severe leg injuries. She might need an amputation. At this, my aunt collapsed against me, clutching her leg and wailing. It's all over. Indeed, my cousin's life was shattered. My aunt had always dreamed of marrying Sweetie into a wealthy family. Because she was beautiful, my aunt had her trained in dance from a young age. Sweetie had managed to get into a decent university thanks to her skills. But a pretty face alone wouldn't attract anyone except older wealthy men. After graduation, my aunt began pushing her into blind dates. I've spent so much on you growing up. It's time to repay me. Sweetie hid at my place, and feeling pity for her, I promised my aunt I'd find a suitable match. I also assured them I'd cover all of Sweetie's expenses while she stayed with us. They agreed immediately, thinking they had struck gold. I held my aunt close, comforting her, while glaring at Ethan. If you hadn't been so careless, Sweetie wouldn't be like this. My aunt's cries drowned out Ethan's attempts to defend himself. Half an hour later, the doctor emerged, sighing. She's alive, but her leg. My aunt fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. When Ethan tried to help her up, she shoved him away. If it weren't for you, my daughter wouldn't need an amputation. I seized the moment. Ethan, in that situation, you completely ignored my sister's injuries. I think you did it on purpose. Ethan's mouth dropped open. It wasn't me. You were the one who dragged me and the driver. I cut him off coldly. We're getting a divorce. You caused my sister's injury. How can you stay in my house? Chapter 5. Realizing I was serious, Ethan started to panic. He gently grabbed my hand. Rena, don't say that. Divorce? What are you talking about? He reached out to hug me. Don't scare me. Don't say such things, please. I don't want a divorce. Disgusted, I pushed him away, causing him to stumble and fall. He quickly crawled to my feet. Rena, stop saying things in anger, okay? In the past, his actions might have moved me to tears. But now, seeing his true colors, I struggled to control my expression. I pulled my leg free from his grip. Let's both cool off for now. My aunt stood there, stunned, as we awaited Sweetie's return. When Sweetie was wheeled out, we rushed forward. Seeing her half-amputated body made my aunt faint. Ethan rushed to help the doctors move her to a nearby chair. Looking at Sweetie, still under anesthesia, my hatred lessened a bit. She had only lost her legs, but I felt as though I had lost my life. Ethan kept peeking over, worry etched on his face. In the afternoon, Sweetie woke up, still groggy from the anesthesia. What happened to me? I didn't answer. Instead, I threw myself onto her, crying. Sweetie, it's all my fault. Ethan forgot you were still in the car, so you. I bluntly lifted the blanket. Your legs are gone. Her scream shattered the silence of the ward. She tried to sit up to look, but I held her down. Struggling against my discomfort, I said, Sweetie, don't worry. I will divorce him. If it weren't for his plans, you wouldn't have lost your legs. Sweetie couldn't process my words. She gasped for air, her face flushed, tears streaming down. My legs! My legs! She screamed, her breathing quickening. Suddenly, she clutched her chest, her breaths becoming shallow. I quickly pressed the call button, and the doctor entered with Ethan following. Seeing Sweetie, Ethan trembled uncontrollably. He glared at me but didn't dare speak. After all, I held the key to his life, money. He didn't want a divorce because we had a prenuptial agreement. When we got married, he had promised to stay home and take care of me. Not wanting him to be a free housekeeper, I offered him a share of the company's dividends. 1% of the shares meant at least 10,000 yuan a month for Ethan. But as the saying goes, money that doesn't belong to him will eventually flow away. At the beginning of the year, I discovered Ethan was gambling. He knelt before me, pleading, I promise I won't gamble again. The biggest mistake a woman can make is being soft-hearted, and I was no exception. I forgave him and paid off all his gambling debts. But I had one condition. I would only give him 10,000 yuan a month for living expenses. Ethan agreed. Perhaps my kindness made him greedy. After Sweetie was sedated, she fell back into a deep sleep. Ethan, come out with me. He hesitated, glancing longingly at Sweetie before finally following me outside. Honey, can we not get a divorce? Chapter 6. My tone softened, and I shook my head with a hint of helplessness. The divorce is certain. I nodded towards Zhang Tian's hospital room with my chin. Now that Tian is in such a condition, you know what my aunt is like. If I don't show some gesture, this won't pass easily. Wu Jiangkai looked more and more confused. I grabbed his hand, speaking earnestly. Honey, we'll just get a fake divorce. Once this blows over, we can remarry immediately. Anyway, we have a prenuptial agreement. If I ever wrong you, you'll still get 5 million yuan. Wu Jiangkai, who was already wavering, was now thoroughly convinced. But he pretended to be reluctant. If that's the case, let's go through with the fake divorce. Truthfully, Wu Jiangkai wasn't very bright. In my previous life, I couldn't understand why he acted the way he did, but now I get it. Fortune favors the bold. I reluctantly took him to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Divorcing now was already challenging. I couldn't imagine if it got more difficult later. As I left the bureau with the divorce papers in hand, I breathed a sigh of relief. Wu Jiangkai seemed to sense something was off and almost begged, Wife, we will remarry, right? I smiled and reassured him. If we don't, you'll still get 5 million yuan. So stop overthinking. After handling this, I told Wu Jiangkai I was heading to the hospital. I'll give the divorce papers to my aunt and show her I've punished you. Wu Jiangkai watched me get into the car. Do I still need to go? I waved him off. Go home and pack your things. I found a place for you. I sent the address to your WeChat. Move there first. Once the fuss dies down, you can come back. I rolled up the window and drove off. I couldn't contain my joy, humming a tune as I drove. I did find Wu Jiangkai a place, but it was in a notorious gray area. An area rife with gambling. Someone with his lack of self-control wouldn't last there. An ex-gambler never truly quits. I left him with 10,000 yuan. A decent sum, but in a gambling den it would be gone in an hour. When I arrived at the hospital, it was already dark. As soon as I stepped off the elevator, I heard Zhang Tian's screams from her room. She was throwing things. Why did it have to be my legs? Why not some other wretch? My aunt quickly covered her mouth. Don't say that. What if someone hears? I don't care. I didn't have to sit in the front seat. I shrugged. It wasn't my idea for her to sit there. Unable to stand her insults any longer, I pushed the door open. The room fell silent. Zhang Tian looked uneasy seeing me. But my aunt warmly welcomed me. Ran about what Tian said. It's all right, Auntie. After all, the problem happened in my car. I'll compensate you, Auntie, don't worry. I'll cover all of her subsequent treatments as well. My aunt beamed at my words. I then walked over and tossed the divorce papers onto the bed. Chapter 7. Tian, to make up for my mistakes. I've divorced Wu Jiangkai. Hearing this, Zhang Tian immediately turned her head, her eyes lighting up at the sight of the divorce certificate. She excitedly picked up the document. You really divorced him? I pressed my lips together and nodded. We're family. From now on, it'll just be us sisters together. A hint of disdain flashed in Zhang Tian's eyes, but she still nodded eagerly. Wu Jiangkai's main reason for wanting to kill me was my money, and his desire to be with Zhang Tian. But Zhang Tian's motive was singular, to replace me. Forced by my aunt to go on blind dates with old men, her feelings grew from envy of my marriage to jealousy, and finally to hatred. Such a twisted mindset can be terrifying when it erupts, especially since I traveled often for work, giving them ample opportunity to conspire together. They eventually concocted a plan to kill me. Thinking of these things, I unconsciously clenched my fists. My aunt's voice pulled me back, calling my name several times. Ran, I was asking about where Wu Jiangkai is now and the medical expenses for Tian. My aunt spoke with a hint of embarrassment. You know, all my money was invested in your sister's future. I don't have a penny left. I patted my chest. Auntie, don't worry. I've already arranged for a caregiver. You can rest well tonight. Turning to Zhang Tian, I asked, Tian, how about getting a caregiver? She looked hesitant at first, but when I added, it'll give you more personal space, she quickly agreed. I stayed in the ward until the caregiver arrived. Tian, I have work at the company tomorrow. I'll leave now. Zhang Tian lay weakly on the bed, phantom limb pain making her nauseous. As I closed the door, I heard her angrily scolding the caregiver. You're just a servant I hired. You'll do what I say. Now go downstairs and get me a bowl of wonton soup from South City. Seeing the caregiver pick up her phone, Zhang Tian's emotions flared. If you dare to snitch, you won't get paid. I hid near the elevator, watching the caregiver leave with a grim face on her electric bike. Then I moved to the side of Zhang Tian's room, listening to her sweetly talking to Wu Jiangkai on the phone. Don't worry, I sent everyone away. Come over quickly. I miss you so much. After hanging up, I hid in the stairwell. About 10 minutes later, a heavily disguised Wu Jiangkai arrived. As soon as he walked in, Zhang Tian started crying. Wu Jiangkai, ever the macho man in front of Zhang Tian, hugged her tightly. I'm sorry, baby. You suffered because of me. It's all that wretch's fault. She's the one who stopped me from saving you. Zhang Tian, lost in her love for him, asked, You two are divorced, right? Wu Jiangkai looked conflicted but finally admitted under Zhang Tian's questioning. Yes, but it's a fake divorce. We'll remarry. I sneered. What a fool. Why would I ever take him back? Zhang Tian pouted. My legs are injured because of you. You can't abandon me. You promised to marry me as soon as you divorced. Did you forget? I stopped recording the video. It was just the right length, not too short, not too long. Chapter 8. I sat in my car, watching my former husband and my own cousin holding hands. So shameless. Without much thought, I called my aunt. It was nearly midnight, and she had clearly been asleep, but my call woke her up. My tone was harsh. Auntie, I treated you like family, but I never expected you to covet my husband. My words instantly cleared her drowsiness. She asked nervously, What do you mean? I raised my voice. What do I mean? How dare you ask? Are you home? I'm coming over. Without hesitation, my aunt replied, I'm home. You can come. By the time I arrived at my aunt's house, it was already 1 a.m. She rubbed her sleepy eyes, looking timidly at my aggressive demeanor. I took a deep breath and threw my phone onto the table. Look for yourself at what your good daughter has done. My aunt shakily picked up the phone. The video showed Zhang Tian questioning Wu Jiangkai. You promised to marry me after the divorce. Are you lying to me? When will you marry me? As the video ended, I slammed my hand on the table and stood up. Auntie, if I hadn't forgotten something and went back to check, I wouldn't have seen such a wonderful scene. My aunt trembled, her voice shaky. Is this a misunderstanding? I laughed bitterly. I wish it were. Patting my chest, I began to speak with feigned sorrow. Auntie, I'm not angry that they're together. I'm worried Tian is being deceived. Hearing her daughter might be in trouble, my aunt's face changed. What do you mean? Wiping the tears I had forced out, I continued. If Tian likes him, she can have him. But Wu Jiangkai is a problem. Because. My aunt grew anxious. Because of what? Speak up. He's a gambler. I'm afraid he'll sweet-talk Tian Tian, who's so naive. And now that we're divorced, she's his new target. I grabbed my aunt's hand with a worried look. You know how gamblers are, Auntie. They can ruin an entire family. My aunt's face visibly darkened. I pressed on. Auntie, think about it. Tian Tian only lost her legs, but her face is fine. She's still young and can find a good man. Breathing heavily, my aunt patted my shoulder. Ran, thank you for telling me this. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known. I held her hand in return. We're family. Let's keep this between us. If Tiantan feels cornered, she might run away with him. My aunt nodded heavily. As I left her house, the moon was bright, casting shadows on my car. I felt an overwhelming sense of joy, to be precise, satisfaction. The satisfaction of revenge. Chapter 9. A month later, Zhang Tian suddenly called me. She was crying hysterically on the other end. Sis, where are you? Can you save me? Mom wants to marry me off to an old man. Please save me. I feigned helplessness. Tian, Auntie's decisions are her own, and I can't interfere. This is your family matter, and my words won't make a difference. Hearing this, Zhang Tian turned rabid, cursing viciously. Zhang Ran, you bitch. You'll die a horrible death. You're just going to let me suffer. You should have died in that car crash. Ignoring her insults, I hung up decisively. After all, her wedding was in 3 days, and we should maintain some semblance of decency. After all, I had handpicked her husband for Auntie. He might be old, but he was wealthy. Auntie had even demanded a 1 million yuan dowry. Over the past month, Wu Jiangkai had sought me out over 100 times. Each time, he begged for us to remarry, and I managed to fend him off with vague promises. Now that the time was right, there was no need for pleasantries. So, when he called that afternoon, I agreed to meet. In the cafe, he sat across from me, heavily disguised. As soon as he sat down, he began to complain. Wife, when can we remarry? I miss you so much. I scoffed. Hold on, I want you to meet someone. Wu Jiangkai didn't miss me. He missed my money. Drowning in debt and high-interest loans, he was desperate. People looking for him had even called me several times. Who? I signaled with my eyes, and a man approached. It's me, Wu Jiangkai. Remember? Seeing the man, Wu Jiangkai's eyes widened in horror. You? How are you here? Suddenly, as if realizing something, he stammered. No, who are you? I don't know you. Wang Bo frowned. I still have the recording of the call you made. You wanted me to crash into your wife's car and promised me 5 million yuan for it. What now, you don't recognize me? Wu Jiangkai jumped to his feet. I didn't. Wu Jiangkai, out of consideration for our marriage, I won't hold this against you. You know the prenuptial agreement. Since you violated it, you won't get a penny. Realizing the situation, Wu Jiangkai angrily pointed at me. You bitch, you set me up. I crossed my arms. Set you up? I just wanted the truth. Seeing him grow more agitated, I raised my phone. If you don't leave, I'll call the police. Attempted murder will land you in jail, and it won't be a pleasant stay. Cursing, Wu Jiangkai quickly put on his mask and left. After he left, I handed Wang Bo 30,000 yuan in cash. He was the driver of the white car, and his appearance today was no accident. My car's repair costs were over 1 million yuan, which he, a drunkard, couldn't afford. So, when he came to me with the recording, I accepted his offer. Ms. Zhang, about the car money. You don't have to pay it back. I attended Zhang Tian's wedding. She sat in a wheelchair, glaring at her groom with disdain. As their lips met, the crowd gasped. But I noticed Zhang Tian's hateful glare directed at me through the crowd. Later, I heard Wu Jiangkai was dead. He gambled and couldn't repay his loans. He borrowed money from Zhang Tian. When her husband found out, he had thugs beat him up. I couldn't help but feel a pang of pity. They beat him to death? The person nodded. Seemed like a fitting end. Later, Auntie came to my office demanding an explanation. My daughter is being tormented like this. We want a divorce. Seeing the photos of Zhang Tian's bruised and battered face, I pushed the phone away. Her arms and body are covered in cigarette burns. I waved my hand, motioning for someone to escort Auntie out. That's their family matter, not mine. Your daughter's lack of morals has nothing to do with me. At a gathering, someone mentioned Mr. Lee's young wife being tortured to death. I was a bit surprised, considering he seemed pleased with Zhang Tian's photo initially. But now Wu Jiangkai and Zhang Tian could be together. Auntie came to me several more times, but after failing to get any help, she went to cause trouble at Mr. Lee's house. She ended up with a broken arm and was thrown out. Later, a female beggar started appearing near our company.